Welcome to the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm your host, Danny Gavin, and together with industry leaders and marketing experts, we'll explore the meeting point of mentorship and marketing. We'll discover how these connections have affected careers, marketing strategies, and lives. Now get ready to get human. Hello, everyone. I'm Danny Gavin, and I'm the host of the Digital Marketing Mentor. I'm also the founder of Optage and a marketing professor. And today we're going to dive down deep into the world of mentorship and marketing with Martha Van Berkel, co-founder and CEO of Schema App. Martha is awesome. I met Martha at a conference years ago, and I was just so elated by her kindness and her willingness to talk and stay in touch, and she's been amazing. So a little bit about Martha and Schema App, her company. Well, Schema App is an end-to-end schema markup solution for SEO teams to stand out in search. I use it. I recommend it all the time. She's also a structured data expert. And most recently, she's contributing a chapter to David Bain and Majestic's book, SEO in 2023. And I'm sure we'll touch upon that a little bit later. But Martha, so glad to have you here. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here, and right back at you, Danny. With regards to you never know who you're going to meet at conferences and where those relationships might blossom. Right? Like I think that's going to be likely a theme as we talk through today's show.
Awesome. I can't agree more. All right, so let's dive in. Let's talk a little bit about your education and background. So, where
Sure.
did you go to school? What did you study? And let's start there.
All right. I was thinking through like you have some hard questions for me today where you're like, what contributed to where you're at today and where you're going and decisions you made. Before I went to university, I did live, like, I moved every 3 years because my dad worked for IBM and, as he got promoted, we moved cities. So in Canada, we have provinces instead of states. So I lived in like 4 different provinces. I moved every 3 years. And so I think that did build resilience in me and sort of not being afraid to move. So I grew up in Vancouver, but I went to university in Ontario at a school called Queen's University. And I studied applied math, which is math and engineering. And I did it because I thought mechanical engineering would be too boring. I
I
don't
don't
know what I
blame
was
you.
thinking, but it was fun. And that adventure, I'm a big believer in like maximizing those opportunities. So at university, I was really, really involved in our engineering society. I played intramural sports. I went on exchange to Scotland in my 3rd year and played varsity field hockey because that was something I was passionate about. I asked to break all the rules in my degree. So my thesis was in mechanical engineering, so I could work with a remote team in Turkey. And they've now made a rule that you can't get an applied math degree without doing a thesis in math. And I think it's the Martha rule because I broke them all. So that's where I went to school. I did later go to MIT and study innovation and strategy. And that was actually instead of doing an MBA, which has its whole story to itself.
Well, let's talk about that because I know that, some people, especially nowadays, we're like getting a recession. Is it a good time for an MBA? Is it not? What's your opinion on an MBA?
Oh man, so I knew you were going to go there. So I originally really wanted to do an MBA, and this was probably in about like 2008, 2009. So I graduated in 2000, so I was about 8 or 9 years into my career at Cisco. So I grew up at the large tech company based out of San Francisco. I moved to the Valley right before the big tech bust, and while I was there, like I had a dream of becoming a general manager. So I wanted to work for a big company and basically run a whole department. Not so different from what I do now, but that's an aside, right? And so part of that, it was like, oh, there's things I just don't know, right? There's things I necessarily can't learn on the ground, things like accounting and finance, where like accounting's kind of backwards once you learn how they do it and so forth. And so I was like, I really should do an MBA. And it was actually working with a coach that was like, well, why? Like, why do you want to do an MBA? And as I dissected that, I figured out that the reason I wanted to do an MBA was because I held a belief that to be successful, I had to have an MBA. And I figured out that belief came as a result of my parents like holding that belief. And then I just adopted it. And so I sort of had this blocker that I couldn't be successful until I did an MBA. But when I actually really recognized it, like I identified those things I wanted to learn, the things I was going to have to give up in my personal life. And I did a lot of volunteer work at this time of my life where I was running like a kids running program where we were mentoring girls complete a 10K to help them believe anything was possible. I was like, I'm not willing to give that really important piece up to do my MBA. And it's a time thing. And so then it was like, well, can I bash the belief that I can't be successful without the MBA? And so I chose to bash that belief. And Cisco was quite happy because they didn't have to pay for it at this point. And so I asked them for two things. I said, but I'd like to go to MIT and I'll pay for all my travel if you pay for the course to do innovation strategy, because that's what I did for Cisco at the time. And I was like, I think this is really relevant. I think it's going to, and I wanted the MIT name on my resume. I wanted to be able to market with that. And then the second thing I want a job where I get the opportunity to lead a broader team and manage a budget so I can get into the finances. And I got both. So my learning from it was like, really ask yourself why on a lot of these things. And then you can sometimes break it down and get the better outcome, right? So then I got the opportunity. I got the real world experience doing it with mentors and people coaching me, because it was like their success was tied to my success because I was like in the job. And I got this really relevant life experience at MIT that was like way more time manageable. So I could continue to do the volunteer work that was really important to me.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And like that sort of like that construct that we build. I have a similar scenario where, I actually went ahead and got that MBA. But to me, success was getting that, you take an MBA, you're supposed to get a six-figure salary in a big corporation. And this was like in 2009, 10, when it was like that recession or, downturn. That never happened for me. And obviously my path after that, was successful. But, I built that up. No one says when you go get an MBA, you have to do that. But to me, I created that. And when I was able to like change my expectations or what success meant,
Oh
then
my God.
I'll be happy.
I love that. So what does success mean? That was the question I asked myself on graduation from engineering. Because when I graduated, I was like, oh, I should get an engineering job, right? Like I've just spent 4 years doing this super hard degree. Like I should apply it, right? But again, who should? Like, where's that should coming from? And I got a job offer, and I actually asked myself the question of, if I were to visualize me being successful, what does that look like? Like literally, what does it look like? And like I was only 22 at the time, so like my answer here is a little superficial, but just go with me on it, right? Because at that time it was important, right? And I was like, well, success for me specifically looks like I'm wearing a suit, I'm traveling, I've got my like laptop bag, and I'm like in something that's super fast paced and I'm learning all the time. And again, like, I don't like to travel anymore because I did that and it was like takes a lot of time out of your life. But what was so interesting is it did serve me though as a filter to then say, can I see myself doing this job and having some of these experiences that right now is my definition of success? And it allowed me to say no to some jobs that if I had just followed the like, oh, I should get an engineering degree, I should do these things, then I would have taken that job in this small town designing bone plates because I thought that I should do that because my degree was, I did biomechanics and I like understood math of stress and strain. Or instead, I took a job at Cisco where I had the opportunity then to work for a global company, constantly learn, define my new job. And I actually moved to California to do it. So the adventure part, the things that like I was able through success to define as to what would fulfill me came out of that.
And I feel like your background of just moving around all the place, I'm sure it must have been hard at the time. But man, I'm sure you developed thick skin and also like looked for opportunities. Like, wow, I grew up in this household, where my dad's moving around and, for opportunities for different things. And like that became the norm, right? So,
Yeah,
like, it's
it
cool.
meant that like that wasn't a risk to me, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go live in Scotland for a year and like have to live at a brand new city that I've never known and make new friends and, join a new field hockey team. Like, all good, right? I'm going to move to California when I'm 22 and like land and, join a new company and be in a new country because, Canada and the US are still have their differences. Yeah, it's like, bring it on. That sounds fun.
So I know this is not a parental podcast, but I think nowadays parents are kind of like, we want to protect our kids so much, but it's, putting them through some of these situations, which, are a little bit more difficult. It really prepares them for later on. Um, you know,
I'm a big believer that there's good that came out of COVID because it forced us to be resilient. It forced our kids to learn how to adapt, right? Like they had to come do school at home. Okay, now they're going back. Now there's these requirements and these new rules that I have to like see what I'm comfortable with, be able to advocate for myself, all those things. So, like much as we look back at those years of our lives, right, and how hard it was. I do think it has built resilience into our kids in a new way that I don't think we'll see for years to come. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that like if they had an environment where they're supportive and they got answers and they figured those out, that those will come back as muscles for them so that they can use that when they're have adversity, when they have change, when they have things they don't like, that they can find their voice and they can navigate that. Yeah, so I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful of that.
Yeah, hope is important, but also just having a positive outlook, right? Because everything in life, we have the good and the bad, and there's always ways to look at it in different ways. And I think looking at even situations which are really rough, right? But looking at the positive side, that helps us all grow and just get better in life and move forward.
Well, and like mentoring is like some of that whole piece that you're looking at. And I do think that like feedback is one of these things, right? Like anytime you get given feedback, and I have like lots of examples, so I'm happy to share stories, is that like, it's either an opportunity for you to sit in victim energy to be like, this person doesn't like me, they're trying to push me down, or it's like, man, if I can sit in a neutral position and just hear them and understand what they're telling me and ask myself if there's a lesson from it. So at our company we call this growth mindset, right? That in every opportunity, even if something failed, even if you did something really bad, there's if you're sitting in an opportunity to learn from it, then that's good, right? I always sometimes say like, oh, that was a really good first attempt and we failed, right? But what do we learn from it? And if we can get any learning, that's good. And so I think, anytime like that feedback cycle, which with mentors or friends or family or colleagues, like they all have an opportunity to be a mentor if you're open and willing to take that feedback. And that sort of plays to like, where are you sitting, right? Are you sitting in a piece of a growth mindset is sort of the words we use at Schema App, but like that's imperative to kind of make that a learning moment versus a diminishing moment is maybe the word I would use.
And a culture which allows mistakes or growth moments is huge. And that's what people are looking for. And that's a really great segue into getting deeper into the world of mentorship. So, how would you define a mentor from Martha's perspective?
Oh man, this I think this is a hard question because um I'm going to divert us, sorry, and then I'll
That's
answer your
fine.
question. So I went to CEO camp this past September. And so I don't know if they do camp and where you're from, but in Canada, in summers, our kids go to summer camp and they stay overnight and they have these um, often great experiences or these experiences of independence where they get to learn and experience new things. And I had the amazing opportunity to join 40 other CEOs of scale up companies in our region. And we went to camp. Like we went and we like stayed in bunks. We had to do songs to earn our lunches and our
Oh, wow.
dinners. And it was so interesting because the reason you asked that is that I left that camp weekend with lots of learnings. But one of the things I wrote on my book was a mentor question mark circle.
Mm.
And the reason was is I was questioning whether I have a mentor today. Should I have a mentor today? And what might that look like for me? And it made me reflect on like, well, what is a mentor and who have been my mentors? And they're often people that I really think of as mentors in my career are people who've been a champion in some sort of way for me and have been courageous enough to give me feedback or to open doors for me. And I say courageous, and also because like they're giving you the gift of time, and they're also giving you the gift of open and honest feedback, or I'll say shared learnings. And that can be very many. That can show up in different ways, right? So I would argue my father today is a mentor for me because he spent many 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 years in sales at IBM, and so and I run sales now at our company, and so it's like Dad, like help me understand how you would manage the situation, or I'm thinking of doing this. What do you think the impact was? And he can, again, courageously share his experiences, or ask me qualifying questions. And then I've had other mentors who are peers of mine now, where they ask me the hard questions and share their experiences, but they're in a similar role that I am in today, and so less of a sort of like they're more senior than me or older than me. And then I would say even early in my career, a lot of times it was my boss or my boss's boss, or women. I have a couple really cool women leaders who kind of just was like, oh, she's going somewhere and I want to help her remove some barriers and sort of help her thrive. And they just raised their hand and said, I want to help. So it really depends.
Yeah, when you mentioned camp, so I actually went to summer camp in Montreal, Canada, like 2 hours
No
north.
way.
Totally. So I love Canada camp and have a lot of wonderful memories, just everything. The French Canadian, the summers, the beautiful clouds in the sky over the lake. Like, so I totally relate. So the fact that you could go back there now, like, it's a dream. I would love that.
Oh my gosh, awesome. I love this. There has been talk of schema camp. So I'll just lay that out that like right before the pandemic, I was actually going to run our first schema camp. So thank you for reseating that, Danny,
Please,
for me.
yes, please put me as number one on that list because I'll be there. It's amazing how like you left this retreat, which technically was kind of like a retreat of peers. And like the question you had is, ooh, do I need a mentor? And then you've enveloped, okay, like, man, I've got lots of mentors in my life. And there's different types, right? There's my dad, there's my bosses, there's my coworkers. And really, you know, for someone, I think even before we were talking about like, I don't know how much of a how many mentors I have, right? I'm more of like on the mentorship side, but really like it's amazing. But you have such like a circle around you of different places to go and to pull from. I'd love to go a little bit deeper into some of those. You spoke to me about like Anna and Denby and Jim, and these were all people in your Cisco time where they really helped you like move and grow in that organization. Do you have any like stories or anything specific
Oh,
regarding
I
those
have so
individuals?
many stories. Well, and this is so like let's frame it right because
Yeah.
so this was like I spent 14 years at Cisco.
Wow.
So I graduated from engineering. Actually, like a friend of mine who was a year ahead had moved to California to join Cisco. All my friends and peers at school went to join Nortel. We know how that happened. So I moved to California and and so those three people are all executives at Cisco at the time, and each of them played a really important role, and I'll say at decision points. And I see these as really important times of your life because it's sort of like it's a decision point, but then 4 years down the road, you're like like they can kind of really go in divergent ways. And Denby played a role where I really needed a change. I was 4 years after so I did technical support for Cisco in early days of voice over IP, and I was team lead, and I was more of a people person. I was like, oh, I think I want to lead more than I want to be a technical expert, and so that was some good. And then I didn't know what my next role was going to be, and a past manager who was someone I had stayed in touch with. You'll see a theme of this. She was like, "Oh, I have a job in Belgium." And again, I like adventures. That's sort of like part of, and it was working with IBM. So again, I had like a family history there. I'd worked there in my summers. Do I want to move to Belgium? And the 24 or 5-year-old me was like, yeah, it's gonna be awesome. It's gonna be a great adventure. And Denby was a director in the technical sport organization, and he actually was on assignment from Australia. So he sort of knew a thing or two about working internationally, and he was at a different stage of his life, but he kind of understood the complexities of it. And he actually took me aside and he was like, "I want to go for a walk." And this is someone like I knew, like he sort of, like he knew he was sort of like part of my. I sort of led the team leads globally, so he knew me like well, okay, but not super well. Like I wouldn't consider him like a direct mentor, but he was like, I have some wisdom I need to pass on to you. And what he said was, he was like, international work is amazing and super fun if supported in the right way. And he said, I'm concerned that at your level, they're going to send you to Belgium. You're going to have a ton of fun, but you're going to get stuck there. And he said, you have a lot of potential at this company, and you're right now in headquarters in San Jose. And he said, I know you're not going to want to hear this, but I don't think you should take this job. And I was like, but this is like, I want a new job. He's like, I will help you find a different job for you to stay in San Jose. He felt so passionately about that he was like, I'll help you find another job. And he did. So I didn't move to Belgium. I stayed at headquarters. And this is actually where Jim Glick comes in, who is I consider, I'll say, one of my champions and one of my mentors. And what I knew but I didn't know there, and now I look back on it, is Jim was an entrepreneur before he joined Cisco, and I was doing a role. I was basically like, they created a role for me, but it wasn't a real role. But they were like trying to keep me in the organization, and I was exploring this legal issue that I won't bore everyone with. And I basically had got to know like everyone at Cisco that had to do with this issue. I just like kept calling people and like following down the rabbit hole. And again, like I was really young and had no title. Like I just was like, I'm going to solve this problem. And this is like one of those things like I could have taken that as like, oh, I don't have a real project. But instead, I was like, what am I going to learn? Like, I'm going to learn how to do project management. I'm going to learn everything I know about this. It's called export controls. Like, I'm going to know everything about it. And then, worst case, like, I just hand this off to someone and I go do something else. But like, I'm going to have some fun and I'm going to just like make this into what I can make it, right? Growth mindset, right? So that was, and what happened is that Cisco got called at the very senior level on this issue that I was now the expert on. And the only reason I was an expert was because I took this opportunity for fun. And I basically got called into a vice president's office. And I'm young, right? Like I'm like 24, 25. I don't know anything. But all I knew was like, they were like, Martha, what do you know about this? And I was like, oh, here's my project plan. Here's all the people you need to pull into the room. This is where our biggest exposure is. And this is what we need to do in the next 60 days in order to get this solved. And I pulled all the people into the room. I directed everyone on what they needed to do. And they got it done. And my vice president looked like a hero. And then he's like, I'm going to have you take on my next biggest project, which was a 3 to 5 year strategy on how to automate support for Cisco. And he championed me and mentored me. I had like no idea how to do strategy. I had no idea like how to work with these senior directors, like in identifying what the themes were in order for us to then put together a budget, a team, pitch it to executives to get funding, and then build a team. But guess what? He saw the entrepreneurial spirit in me, that he was willing then to coach me and mentor me on how to like I had to stand in front of 10 executives on a monthly basis and just get like you think of, I don't know, you guys have Shark Tank in the US, like Dragon's
We
Den in
do.
Canada. But he like coached me on like, like under promise, over deliver, right? Was one of the things that I still like think of that coaching, right? Or, Martha, like prove like like stand there with confidence and answer with the information you have, but like stand tall. Like they don't know what you don't know, right? And the reason I share this story, Danny, is like that mentoring opportunity. So like, yeah, I made him look good. Like I got the opportunity and the support then to build this organization within Cisco that ended up being over 200 people, manage a budget. Oh wait, those are all the things I wanted to do and grow and learn, remember?
Yes.
Right? But it wasn't just because like it's about you have to do the hard work and then those mentors will also show up because they want you to be successful. Because your success is their success, right? And what I didn't know then that I know now is that he lit up this entrepreneurial spirit in me that like I'm now the CEO of a company I co-founded, right? Holy smokes, like, thank you, Jim. And I have told him thank you and Denby and others. But like these are like pivotal moments where I really do believe like you have to be sitting in that energy of opportunistic of like, if I had sat in the energy, and I'm sure I had lots of moments of doubt like during this period. I've chosen not to remember them as much now, but like I just kept asking, like, great, like, what do I need to get done? Like, what do I need to learn? Like, how do I figure this out? Who can I work with? Like, I just kept asking the questions of and advocating for what I needed. And those people just kept showing up. I
I
don't know if that's
mean,
helpful.
no, it's so helpful. The problem is it's so many ideas, so many nuggets of
um,
wisdom. I mean, first of all, the concept of jumping for opportunities, it's so important because I feel most people are like in the mediocre space in the world, right? I have a job description, I get it done, and then I'm good. However, people don't realize that if you just go a little bit higher, you do more than what's asked of you. You look for those opportunities. That's when you see the success. Whether you're in college and like just studying, or you're in a workplace, in an
Anything.
internship, anything. But the problem is like, it's sort of like we're giving people the secret here, but people don't jump at it,
You have
right?
to actually do it. Well, yeah. Well, and to be honest, I did apply for other jobs at Cisco, but my career, 14 years, right? I didn't apply for one job. I created, or like a champion of mine or a mentor of mine created a job for me to go do. And like, so part of it is like, if you sit in your passion, right? Like if you sit in doing the things you love to do and you ask for permission, like a lot of the things I did was on my extra time too. Like my other favorite as like I basically anything I was a pilot was basically my permission to break all the rules and then like ask for permission later. I piloted with AT&T an open API to all their service data. It was all public information, right? I was like, there's no, but like they want AT&T really wanted it. It was going to like unlock their ability to spend tons more money with Cisco. No one wanted to do it because it was going to have to break a ton of rule. IT bought in, my boss bought in. We're like, we're just going to do it, and then we're going to have AT&T like tell them it's the best thing we've ever done. And they did that. Got in all kinds of trouble. My hand slapped, but it was like, but like there was the team was so energized. Like no one was going to stop us from doing this because it was like the right thing for the customer. It like played all around, like it wasn't breaking any legal rules. Like it was just value creation. And everyone said we couldn't do it, and we did it. And we did it with like 6 different organizations who like didn't need to work together but decided to work together. And like those are the moments I remember, right? Like I don't remember doing the job that was mundane. Like I did the job that was mundane because I had then like once I did that quickly, I could go and do these other things. And that's actually like I think what where I grew the most, where my peers grew the most. Um, and where frankly, like champions popped up because they also were sort of they caught on to the passion, right? They caught on to that energy.
Yeah, it's so cool because like I'm envisioning being there, like in that, sometimes people envision like a corporate world, like kind of rough, but it sounds like, man, you were just like breaking open doors and having a great time, and
Well,
it was
I ended
pretty
up
cool.
leaving because I started getting in trouble because there was like a little too, like there I needed to I wanted to change and move faster. And that's actually why why I ended up becoming an entrepreneur in the end was because it's like, well, what if we can move faster? What if we just like make the decision and go? And what if we can then create something that allows our customers to like do that as well? Like, which is sort of, what we really attempt to do in a really complex area of SEO is just like make, feel that energy, right? Like, can we get that energy and speed and agility that so many large organizations or even small organizations are challenged with? So that was sort of, I'll say like what was a stress point in my last role that we tried to, eventually, because it doesn't happen overnight, like has turned into like part of our why of like what we do today. Um, and all of that because I got, someone because Demby took me aside and told me not to move to Belgium.
So having these people like Denby and Jim in your life, and like, there's two ways of looking at like corporate people. Like they want to look good, so they're going to make sure they look good. But on the other hand, like going out of their way and actually mentoring and actually giving advice, um, and changing people's lives, like it tells a lot to like those corporate people. Like, hey, you should be doing that, and look what you can accomplish just outside. So I'm saying now that you are kind of like, obviously, your business is not necessarily a corporate behemoth, but do you look back at those people and then situations that you're in now and try to find those areas with people in your company where you're the mentor and you're providing that mentorship?
Absolutely. And I think it's like anybody who has a big heart, right? Like I don't think it matters what type of organization you're in. But if you really believe that like you have an opportunity to help someone grow, and that they're open to it, right? Like really like that's so important. And that's like an aha I've had through our conversation. So thank you, Danny, is I think that can show up anywhere. And so in our organization now, it's interesting because like I have my direct team, right, who is accountable to me. So totally. So I run in the business. So I am the CEO, but I like sales, marketing, CS directly reports into me. And then my co-founder, who's our COO, he runs like product operations and in finance. And so that's sort of like how we divide and conquer to get things done. But we also like I get the chance to do skip levels. So anyone who I see as a high potential, so people who are delivering or going above and beyond, I spend extra time with. And part of that is sometimes to answer questions around why, like if they want to dig deeper into sort of why we're doing a certain strategy or so forth. And then it's also time for me to understand really what energizes them and what drains them. And actually, another great takeaway from my CEO camp was one of the speakers who runs a bit of a larger organization than us said that he has just over 100 employees. And he's like, I call every one of my employees once a quarter. I was like, that's a lot of people. And he was like, yeah, but you know what? I connect with them and I learn things about how I can make their lives better and what like the organization can do better by just setting that time aside and being open to listening. And so that's like while I've done skip levels with our high potentials, now I'm actually going to do a skip level with the whole company. So we're about 30 people. And so once a quarter, I will now have 30 minutes with everyone. And the questions are the same. What's energizing you? What's draining you? What do I need to know? What do I need to hear? I see that as reverse mentoring. So I see that as an opportunity for the employees, um, should they have the confidence and should they, trust that I'm sitting in growth mindset, they get to tell me what needs to change or what is working. And to me, that's I'm super jazzed about those sessions. So I learn a lot from the ones I do today, and I'm looking forward to the reverse mentoring that I can get from the employee. And I think this is one that like the right person wants to hear your opinion and the right person wants to hear how they can do better and how the company can improve. And I think I maybe got lucky that, I found those people at Cisco that like cared about their company and their results and so forth. And so they wanted to hear my opinion on it. And I had to be, data driven, have examples, like be prepared. But I see that as sort of like a cool way for any organization, any leader even, to kind of switch it around, right? And listen.
I'm so excited that you're implementing the one-on-ones with everyone in the company. I'm a huge believer. Sometimes, as CEOs, we create all these levels because, we need to get out of the company, not in the company. But, getting rid of those personal relationships and, like you said, like being on the ground floor and talking to people, um, there's nothing that can equate. So even if it's like, we have lots of priorities as CEOs, but you know what? Push something else aside to make that happen. And yeah, I can't
Absolutely.
stress that more. So that's so cool that that was one of the big takeaways, and that you're something you're looking to implement now.
Yeah, and I think it's easier in a in-person environment. Like when everyone was in the office, it was very natural. I could just pop by someone's desk or I could walk to lunch with them or offer to buy them a coffee. In the virtual world, I think we have to be more intentional about it. And so that's what I'm doing.
Wonderful. Another, I would say, mentoring aspect with you is the fact that you're writing a chapter for this book, SEO in 2023. Why do I call it mentoring? Because you're basically taking this knowledge and you're sharing it with others and showing them, how to be better, specifically when it comes, I assume, to schema. So, let's talk about the book a little bit and your involvement.
Sure. So sponsored by Majestic, and they sort of reach out to thought leaders and experts. So I wrote in last year's book as well, and I'm just excited. One, to I still have moments where I'm like, I'm an expert in schema markup. Like people want to learn from me. So they're don't.
I'm
I
sorry to
think
tell you, Martha, but you are.
Yes, yeah. So it's and this is again where things I didn't think that would happen in my life, but that have happened as a result of sort of the company we've built and sort of the need to sort of teach and grow the world's knowledge about this, right? And so the book is really about a lot of our learnings, and I'm happy to share. We also just kind of captured kind of a big kind of retrospective on 2022 in structured data on our blog. So I'm happy to share that link with you as well. But the chapter in the book really talks about like thinking about your schema markup strategy like a financial portfolio and really sort of how do you How do you really think about diversification? How do you think about making sure that you're being planful? How do you work as a team sort of across the organization? So content, IT, and so forth. I'm just excited to kind of share some of what we see as, I'll say, like ongoing themes as we work with our customers, and then share, I'll say, like on a more high level, like what that approach looks like and how you can use that approach to better get results for your marketing team.
Awesome. I can't wait to read it. The funny thing about schema markup is, especially like when I'm teaching people about it the first time, it doesn't come up as like, ooh, like a big part of SEO. And a lot of people, when they find out about it, it's like, this is so cool. I love it. So it's interesting how it's like an aspect of SEO. Sometimes it doesn't get enough play, but like what you're opening up to people is no, like this is a whole thing on its own. And if you really dive deep into it, you can see a lot of amazing results. So why don't we quickly, for those people who don't know what schema markup is, how can we best explain schema for them?
Yeah, so I always like to start with the outcome because that's like, well, what are you going to see different? So when you do a Google search and you see extra information in the search results, like stars or FAQ or price information or a big video image, or sometimes even carousels of recipes, those are enabled when that website has code called schema markup or structured data on the website that Google reads and then rewards that extra result in search. And so schema markup is code basically that's translating the website content into this vocabulary. And that's what we do at Schema App. So we basically specialize in only sort of producing that code either page by page through our do-it-yourself tools or at scale, with our enterprise solution. So, it's we do it all day, every day, and it's fun because it's a part of SEO where you can ask yourself, like, what is this page talking about? Like, what is this thing? Is in essence like the philosophical question, which I think is really fun in marketing because this comes into all the things, right? Like, well, what was my intention? Who is the audience? What is the main things I'm trying to articulate in this page? And do I do that in a comprehensive way? Am I connecting it to other related things? Or does this fit into the overall customer journey? And how do I want to have that first interaction with this piece of content show up in the SERP? And so that's sort of why marketers do it, why SEOs do it, is really to stand out in search. And what else was cool, it is that it is a really measurable part of SEO in that Google Search Console allows you to actually measure how many clicks, impressions, and click-through rate you get from that additional kind of enriched result, or what they call rich results. So yeah, so that's what it is. But it is a little complex. But if you want to learn more, like we have a ton of learning resources, and my hope, Danny, is that we have more this coming year. Can we sort of empower the market to really understand what schema markup is and how they can use it to drive results?
In my teaching, I feel like you gave me a cheat code. We learn about schema and we learn about the markup and JSON and different things like that. So obviously beginners want to know, oh, well, how can I do this on my website, right? And I'm like, well, you just got to create an account on schemaapp.com and you'll be able to do it. So thank you for the cheat code.
You're very welcome. Anytime.
So what's your favorite approach or element of structured markup? uh, uh, you know, when it comes to marketing, is there a certain part of it or a certain class?
Our purpose of our company is to make meaningful connections and to be understood. And that means with people, right? That means in our content. And so I think the coolest part about the structured data is that it allows like true understanding of the content and allows you to be very particular and basically describe anything. And so when you're asking me that, I was like, well, I kind of like multi-type entities where like, okay, now this is super nerdy, but it's like where like one class might not explain what you are. So if you're a house for sale, like just saying you're a house doesn't really explain you. Just saying you're a product doesn't really explain you. But if you combine the two of them, like you can really truly be understood, because it allows you to have a price. It allows you to have like a number of bedrooms, like size of footprint. So I like that. I like that it comes down to people understanding, which is kind of my why.
It brings me back to memories of while I was studying my MBA, and my focus was marketing. So I typically, people say, okay, do all the marketing courses. But to me, it was like, I don't want to just take marketing courses. I want to take courses that I think are going to make a difference, right? So I took a course on database design, like relationship
Hmm.
databases. To me, it felt like, it was in the MIS department, and like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was like one guy with all these MIS students. But it changed like my life in just how understanding things. So when you talk about like relationships, it's like to me, it's like, ooh, I never like put the two and two together. But really, the similar to databases where we keep information in certain places and we relate them. Like I didn't think of schema as being like in a way like a database, right?
Oh, it is. Absolutely, it is. Yeah. Yeah. So like when we recently had a conversation with one of our very large companies, and we were like, when you put your schema on your website, so it's actually like really important that the schema like lives on your website and you own that data. And this is like, again, one of our tenants is that like you own that data. Is that like it's actually like defining your content, right? And like all those bucket, like your web page that describes this is holding, like the schema is holding that like structured data of what that website's about, right? And then when you connect it appropriately, like you're actually describing your company, your brand, like your content. So yeah, that's now we're getting very philosophical on this, Danny, but like that's actually like, we are a semantic technology company, which is like how all things are connected, and your knowledge graph. When I use that word, I'm talking about not the knowledge graph and how the panel shows up in Google, but like
Right.
how is your data connected in a meaningful way that explains exactly what you do and who you are, so you can be of service to your customers. And yeah, that's those are those are sort of like what has come out of all that learning from that journey through Cisco and my MBA and my school, is that like that that these things matter, and explaining that why matters, and that there's goodness that comes from helping others, right?
Totally. So if you think about it, like that's the underlying reason, right? It's sort of like we're making it easier for Google to understand what the site is so that we can actually help people get what
Be of
they need.
service. Yeah,
Yeah, which is
absolutely.
which is amazing. There's a question that a lot of people ask me, specifically when we're talking about schema, and the question is, does Google really need it? Like does Google really need the schema? Like, does it really make a difference? I understand it makes it easier for them, but like, is there a point where like Google won't need it anymore? Or I don't know. Have you thought about that? Like, do people ask you that?
Absolutely. Yeah, I get asked a lot. And it's interesting because I think of this like we often just need to step back and say like, well, what does it cost Google to do different things, right? And in the Ryan Levering podcast that came out in April from Google, where there's like, it's called Structured Data, What's It All About? I have my version of the summary on our website. So if you go to our blog, you'll see it there. But it's he talked about like you either do all the hard machine learning work, which is very resource intensive, right? And then sort of use structured data to enhance it, or you start with the easy read of the structured data and then just invest a little bit to do the machine learning and the inferencing. And so in the podcast, he really talks about like how those things really work hand in hand. And so I think that, while the machine learning, there's lots of conversation about OpenAI and GT and everything right now, but it's like, what are the jobs to be done, and sort of where should you invest that extra money? Well, they like that they also say that like it's good to have give the website owner some control, right? Because they're then more likely to participate, which is important, right? And then also the resource piece. So I'm not concerned about it going away, and that like it helps Google and it like makes it less resource intensive, and it gives us control. And so meaning like it balances out a little bit of the imbalance and control like within the SEO world. So I don't stress about it. I think it makes a lot of sense when you think about sort of like resources to invest in order to get to answers. Like if we're going to give you that data, why would you do the hard work to figure it out on your own, right? Like why? And it balances out the relationship. So that's my take on it. It's a really, I encourage, it's a 3-minute podcast. I really encourage people to listen to it. If you're interested at all in structured data, they do a good job explaining it. Martin's also on it. Like it's a good half hour.
And I love your point about control. Like, there's so much when it comes to SEO that we're not in control of. So whatever Google can give to us where we do have some control, like that's awesome, right? And we're gonna hold on to
Absolutely.
that. and it helps them, right? Because, like you said, we're moving down a path of more AI, but I still think at every point there still needs to be that human involved. At some point, I was just talking to one of my colleagues just about testing like ad copy, using the new open, chat. And the bottom line is like, maybe one day it will be perfected, but the idea is that they get our great starter points, but you usually, 99% of the time they have to take that and to finesse it. So just tying it back to schema, it's a similar concept where, man, yes, AI can do a lot, but if we have the power to mold and really say what our organization is, what are our services, what is the building blocks of what we do, that's very powerful, and hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah, I'm excited how like schema should play more of a role with content teams, and it's sort of like broadening who in marketing actually needs to know about it. So that's like I spoke at SMX Next, and that was a lot of what I talked about is like how like SEO is a team sport where I see content teams being playing a more important role, especially with this past year with all the helpful content updates. Like I think it's supporting the fact that it's a team sport, right? So it's not just something you can do on your own. It really is sort of working cross functionally with those different groups.
And a quick tip, just that you told me, so I'm not taking credit for this at all, but you told me this a while ago. A good example, guys, is if you have like a blog post, it covers a lot of questions and answers. A really great thing that you can do is either you could, mark up the subheadings as questions, or you could actually at the bottom of that article go in and summarize like the top questions and answers that were covered. So now instead of just a regular blog post, you've actually added this FAQ schema that when it shows up in Google, you have extra, extra goodies for Google to use, and hopefully further accentuate your content and your listings over someone else. Little things like that, like can make a huge difference. And I think that's a cool tip that you gave me, Martha, but it's nice to share with our
Yeah,
listeners as
that
well.
one's in the book this year.
Oh, wonderful. Great. But at least I've been listening, right? So
Amazing. Thank you.
cool. Well, I before we close up, I'd love to know what are the top 3 books that you recommend to our listeners?
Oh man, and I have to frame this by like this is CEO brain, Martha, right? So not structured data brain, Martha. But there's three that come to mind. One is called Tools of the Titan, and this one's great because it covers lots of different topics about leadership, about health, and I like it because it's one of those like almost like choose your own adventure. Like you can just read a chapter is like 3 or 4 pages, and it's just wicked awesome. Hard Things About the Hard Things. So if you're a leader, it's just an awesome book that gives you perspective from a really seasoned CEO about everything from promoting people, hiring friends, firing people, you name it. And the other is like a book that actually my husband found out about during his MBA. Oh, how about that? Here we go, tie it all together, called U Squared, and it's Price Pritchett. And this is really about like high velocity formula for multiplying your personal effectiveness in quantum leaps. And it's super super short, but it really challenges you to say like, what's that quantum leap? What's that next thing that you just like are so passionate about, and how do you basically make that happen?
So talk about next thing. What's 2023 looking like for you?
Oh, I feel like I have a lot of like learning and growing to do this year as a leader, specifically like wearing my sales and marketing hat. So I'm really excited to kind of weekly reflect on like what I learned, what I'm going to do differently. How do I sort of really kind of empower that team, scale that team? So that's something that I'm really excited about. And we're going into a recession year, a harder year. So I think it's a good time to learn. I think it's a new season for me, sort of in my leadership, and I often joke like every time we hire a new person, it's like, well, I've never been the CEO of a 30-person company, I've never been the CEO of a 31-person company, and so again, just sitting in that like I'm not going to be perfect either, but I'm committed to continuing to sit in growth mindset and learn.
I love your positivity and just the opportunity that each new thing, comes. It's so cool.
There's
Um,
bad days, but I try to stay mostly in that energy. Yeah.
it's a very good and positive energy to be in. So, where can our listeners learn more about you and your business?
Sure. So Schema App, 2 places to check us out. So our website, www.schemaapp.com, schemaapp.com, or follow us on LinkedIn. We post a ton of content there. So if you spend time on LinkedIn and want to learn more about what we do or what's going on in our industry, that's a great place to follow us. And then to kind of learn about me, I'm on Twitter. I do respond if you tag me in things, but I'm not one of those like active Twitter people. If you want to connect with me, or feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. But make sure to send a note as to why you want to connect and how you heard about me. So if you don't send a note, I won't accept.
Yeah, we don't want any bots. No bots contacting Martha, okay? Martha, thank you so much for being a guest on the Digital Marketing Mentor. It was exceeded all my expectations, and really, really enjoyed chatting with you today. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Digital Marketing Mentor.
Amazing. Thanks, Danny.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Marketing Mentor podcast. Be sure to check us out online at thedmmentor.com and at the DM Mentor on Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts for more marketing mentor magic. See you next time.